Great. Call this meeting of the Housing Authority of the City of Salem for October 14th, 2019 to order. If the recorder will call the roll, please.
Vice Chair Kaiser. Present. Commissioner Anderson.
Likewise.
Commissioner Nanke.
Here.
Commissioner Leung is absent. Commissioner Osick.
Here.
Chair Hoy.
Here.
Commissioner Lewis.
Here. Thank you. If you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And I'm going to take the privilege of the chair for just a moment and acknowledge that this is the 50th anniversary of the Salem Housing Authority. And I just want to throw out a few statistics before I allow staff to make a couple of comments and other counselors. So at the Salem Housing Authority, we have 45 very dedicated professional employees, currently serving over 8,000 clients. As we speak today, over 8,000 clients, which is quite a number. We have 2,843 Section 8 vouchers currently in use. We have 240 HRAP clients that we've served. And in those 50 years, we estimate that the Salem Housing Authority has served over 75,000 people. So I just wanted to say from the chair, thank you for your dedication and your hard work to all of the staff of the Salem Housing Authority. And with that, we'll go to public comment, unless other counselors wanted to comment on the anniversary. All right. Nobody has signed up. Commissioner Kaiser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded.
All right. And on the consent calendar, we have 3.1A, which are minutes from our September 23rd meeting. We have under action items 3.2A, which is an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Salem for administrative services. And that is it.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. We have no public hearings, no special orders of business. Information report. Administrator Oots.
Thank you. I'm Nicole Yates. I'm the Housing Administrator, Salem Housing Authority. So today when the staff walked through the doors of the various Salem Housing Authority offices throughout Salem, they celebrated a very exciting milestone. I speak tonight on behalf of the Salem Housing Authority staff for our commissioners, board members, and many previous and retired employees of the Salem Housing Authority who have all worked tirelessly through the years to ensure the mission of the Housing Authority is carried out with the utmost care and compassion for the low-income residents we serve throughout Salem and Kaiser. Today, the Salem Housing Authority staff walked through the doors to celebrate 50th year for the Housing Authority. On October 13th, 1969, the Salem City Council created the Housing Authority of the City of Salem, now also known as Shaw Salem Housing Authority and many other acronyms. Through the years of service, the community, and steady growth in our city, the Housing Authority has developed a housing portfolio of more than 700 units in the city limits of Salem Kaiser and continues to serve nearly 3,000 housing choice vouchers annually. The list of additional programs that the Housing Authority continues to operate could go on for some time. The success stories of our clients continue to grow annually, and it takes a dedicated staff, commissioners, board members, and a city that cares to continue this legacy for 5 decades and counting. There is not a high turnover rate of employment within our agency due to caring and compassionate staff that come to work each day to ensure the next resident in need has the ability to have decent, safe, and affordable housing. The Housing Authority is a proud partner with the City of Salem for 50 years and looking forward to continued service to our community. On behalf of the entire Salem Housing Authority team, we want to thank you, City of Salem counselors, for creating our agency 50 years ago.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the staff report? Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to you and everybody
who works with you, and please convey the council's appreciation for what you do to the rest of your staff. I emailed you this afternoon with some questions I would have tonight, and so let's start with them. The first one is on page 1, where you indicate the 8,007 individuals have been helped, and it's equivalent to about 4% of the actual population of our city. And Kaiser, thank you, Councilor Nanke, or Commissioner Nanke. And my question are, what is the true figure? I mean, we're helping 4%, and how many people could be helped? What is the percentage of Salem Kaiser that is in need of such type of assistance? And then where does this 4% figure in with like cities in the state, in the region, and in the nation?
Sure. So with your email this afternoon, we did do some research for other local cities, and I was just at the National Affordable Housing Conference in San Antonio, so I did have a lot of communication with other housing authorities. So the average is anywhere from about 2% to 6% of the population of cities of our size, and even some of the larger and smaller cities around. But I can tell you that, like, Seattle Housing Authority is assisting 3% of its population. Portland is assisting 5%. They are also a moving to work agency, which has a little bit of different funding availability. And Eugene, which is Homes for Good now, is assisting about 4% of their population. So we're right in line with other housing authorities in our area.
Thank you very much. That's good to know. I guess my question, the second part of my question is, we're helping 4%. Assuming we had the funds and assuming other things, should we be helping 6%? Should we be helping 8%? Or is 4%, that's the amount of people we are helping are the amount of people who should be helped to live in our city?
There's always a higher need, and that was pretty much given from the national conference, is that every housing authority has a need, and I can tell you that at any given time, we have 15,000 people on our waiting list.
So about double what we're helping. Well, actually, yeah, it's what we're helping is 1/3 of the people. If there are 15,000 on the waiting list plus the 8,000, that's 23,000 people.
Right. And I can tell you that some of our applicants on our waiting list are duplicates because they can do multiple applications for different programs.
And maybe, looking at it optimistically, some people are on the waiting list who no longer need to be on the waiting list.
Correct.
Then if I may continue.
Yes.
I have another question about the security deposit assistance, which is on page 2 of the programs. We're 25% through the budget year, but we have now spent 36.5%. And I am certain that we needed to spend that money. I know we need to spend that money. My question is, what happens if this continues? Because 3/4 of the way through, we'll be over our allocated percentage. So how does the Housing Authority propose to deal with this situation if it arises?
Sure. So the security deposit program is really dependent on the voucher lease-up program. In past years, you've seen where we haven't had vouchers to lease up, and that money is taking longer to expend out. This year, we have been really trying to push the vouchers out and get the utilization up. That is what you're seeing, the increase in the budget spending of the security deposit program. So we were actually allocated for 3 years at an $81,000 increment. I can tell you that the supervisor of this program just last week had contacted the urban development team to see if there was any chance for an amendment to that. We are trying to be mindful of allocating funds to continue through these next 3 years and not just take the full pot of 3 years of money and spend it all this year. But there's a high need currently.
Sure.
Because there's a lot of vouchers out there that are in the process of being earmarked for lease-up, so.
So Kristen Rutherford, Urban Development Director, and the agreement can be amended, but Shaw would not be eligible to receive more funding within that 3-year window for this program. So that's going to be a discussion that we're going to have to sit down and have as to how much more do they want to front load, because then they could run short towards year 2 and year 3.
And if I understand, the Ms. Utz, what you're hoping is that you're having an aggressive effort now to get those vouchers in, and so theoretically, at least, the percentages will go down because you front-loaded them. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and then it sounds, Director Rutherford, like there is no place from which this money would come if they ask an increase. It would have to come from, just be built into the next 3-year cycle. You would want to ask for more. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. One final question.
All right.
I'm looking at the VASH 59 of 64. VASH is Veterans Assistance Program. So there's 64 people who have applied and 59 have been served, which is a terrific situation. I'm just wondering, are there more? There seems to me that ought to be more than 64 veterans who are homeless who might be entitled to the service. Is that the case? And if so, how do you have, what kind of outreach do you have to make sure that homeless veterans are aware of this?
So we're completely dependent on the Veteran Administration for referrals to that program. So at this time, that is the number they're saying are qualified for our assistance and sent over. That the number difference is what you're seeing is potentially out there with a voucher ready to lease up. But really, we only have about 5 more slots to utilize.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none and seeing nothing further on our agenda, we're adjourned.
Call this meeting of the City of Salem Urban Renewal Agency for October 14th to order. If the clerk, please call the roll.
Board Member Kaiser. Board Member Anderson.
Likewise.
Board Member Nanki. Board Member Leung is absent. Board Member Osick.
Here.
Board Member Hoy.
Here.
Board Member Lewis.
Here.
And Chair Bennett.
Here. Okay, do we have any additions or deletions to this one?
No.
All righty. Do we have any public comment? No one has signed up for public comment. Did anyone want to address the Urban Renewal Agency? I just want to give you a little extra time to think about that. Okay, why don't we do the consent calendar, Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move approval of the consent calendar with the following poll, 3.3D by Councilor Anderson.
Second.
All right, the consent calendar, item 3.1A are the September 9, 2019 draft Urban Renewal Agency minutes. Item 3.3A is an amendment with the West Salem Urban Renewal Area Redevelopment Grant Program guidelines. Item 3.3B authorizes the Executive Director to execute the attached amendment to the development agreement with Cause on State Street LLC. Item 3.3C is an assignment and amendment to the promissory note with the State Street Square LLC. And that concludes the consent agenda.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion passes. We have no public hearings. And Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the staff recommendation on item 3.3D.
Second.
Second by Hoy. Go ahead, Councilor.
Thank you. This is a very good program, and I had some questions that Commissioner Rutherford and I talked about today, and it was a little bit counterintuitive to me, and maybe I didn't read it closely enough, but it seemed that what you were saying is by reducing the grant amount from $100,000 to $50,000, we would get more applicants, and I'm not exactly sure how that happens. And then you offered another explanation, a better explanation as to why we are doing this. So I would just like you to publicize this a bit, because you know, there's grants that are available to people whose businesses and livelihood are in this urban renewal area.
Certainly happy to clarify this. So this action is going to add $100,000 to the budget for this grant program. And then it's going to reduce the maximum amount of each grant that we would award from a maximum of $50,000 to $30,000. That will allow us to benefit more properties throughout the downtown. After we've been running this program for a number of months now, we found that our average grant is $25,000 or less. We've had a couple that were closer to $50,000, and this will allow us to kind of spread out the use of those funds to benefit more properties.
What are they used for?
Yes, so this grant program, it came out of the Downtown Homeless Solutions Task Force, where we heard concerns about vandalism, site security, trash, those sorts of things. So these funds can be used to install cameras, to build trash enclosures, to add additional lighting for security.
Okay.
And this is a 100% coverage grant up to that amount.
Thank you for that question, Mr. Mayor, because that is what I would like to see publicized, and I'm sure you're doing this. And Councilor Kaiser chaired the Downtown Homelessness Task Force, and it came up with a number of recommendations, many of which were directed toward the merchants and the people who live downtown, and this is one of them. So I'm sure I don't have to encourage you to make sure that everybody downtown knows that they are available, these grants are available to them.
Yes, Cherie Wargren, our downtown revitalization manager, and her staff have been doing a great deal of outreach. We've had a number of grants that we've given so far, and we know of at least 2 circumstances where these grants have helped address the vandalism that's occurring.
Will you have enough funds then, do you think, for the grant demand?
That's hard to say. We've been moving the money towards this line item kind of in chunks to gauge the demand since we're kind of in the first year of this program.
Okay. Councilor Lewis?
Just curious, the options for the grants when it comes to installation of cameras, how prevalent is that?
How many, are you asking how many grants we have?
How prevalent in the applications that you've had?
Oh, I'm going to turn to Cherie for that answer.
Cherie Wargren, Downtown Revitalization Manager. Was your question, Councilor Lewis? How many people?
I'm just curious of the percentage of grant applications, how many of them are for cameras?
Just about 50% have put in security cameras. And I met with one of the property owners who has done that today, and he was saying he used it to contact the police department, and that's the second one that's put them in that has told me it has stopped and has helped with crime prevention.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? All righty. We have a motion on the floor. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion passes. And that is all we have for the Urban Renewal Agency this evening, so we're adjourned. Call this meeting of the Salem City Council to order, October 14th. If the recorder please call a roll.
Counselor Kaiser? Present. Counselor Anderson?
Also.
Counselor Nanki? Here. Counselor Leung is absent. Counselor Osick?
Here.
Counselor Hoy?
Here.
Counselor Lewis?
Here.
And Mayor Bennett.
Here. Okay. Additions?
We do have a revision to tonight's agenda. That would be moving item 5B to item 1.4A under presentations.
Okay. All righty. All those in favor of the additions and deletions or not?
Aye.
Good. Motion passes.
I think I heard Osick second my motion, by the way.
Did you? Okay. I assume somebody did and the recorder heard it and didn't call me on it, so. Okay, any counselor comments? Had a chance to participate in the groundbreaking for the Nishioka building, the cause development that we talked about earlier on the urban renewal agency discussion, and it's very exciting. 148 apartment units, first floor retail. It's all at the old McMahon Les Newman site, if you all remember that, before it burned to the ground and has been sitting vacant for about a decade now. It's been quite a while. We've been very excited to see that start to come online. It should be ready for occupancy. Their projection now is 2020 for those downtown units. Anyone else? Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Mayor. I have some good news to share regarding a problematic property on Vaughn in Ward 6 that councilors have heard about. Community Development, working with Councilor Hoy, police, neighbors, and the property owner, have achieved positive outcomes for everyone, including the property owner. The owner has moved, and there will be a new house constructed on the lot.
Great.
My thanks to Community Development and Police for their continued work, and thank you, Councilor Hoy.
Councilor Hoy, do you want to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank staff for their dedication to that, especially the folks from code enforcement and the police department. They have worked tirelessly, and for the neighbors who frankly held us accountable for the problem in the neighborhood. And I don't think we would have achieved this outcome without them holding us accountable to it, and I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, I join you in that, Councilor.
Yeah.
I thought they did a great job of keeping us focused on the
Yes.
problem they had there, and it was a real big one.
It was a
So
big problem.
Congratulations to you for the work you've done as well.
Thank you. I also just want to say one other thing in terms of positive things happening in Ward 6. Next Tuesday, the 22nd at 4 p.m., McKay Park will have the playground equipment dedication, and that's really exciting for the folks out in my neighborhood out in Ward 6. So I invite you all to attend 4 p.m. McKay Park. It's right there adjacent to McKay High School.
Great. Looking forward to it. Anyone else?
I have one other
Oh,
item.
I'm sorry, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. The city and urban renewal are on the home stretch of finishing the Boise slab removal project, otherwise known as daylighting Pringle Creek. And I'd like Director Fernandez to give the city council a brief update on the project and where we're at today and where we're heading.
Yeah, thank you. Peter Fernandez, Public Works Director. We're delighted to report that we are, well, beyond the home stretch of completing the project. There's some dirt being removed today and tomorrow that had been contaminated, so it needs to be landfilled instead of moved around. There is some landscaping that is coming into play, and we're done. And that creek is back where nature intended it to be to begin with, and the sun is shining on it, which is the, sun hadn't shone on it for, 100 years. So we're just delighted. I want to thank, it just so happens that Julie Tichborn, who's our project manager on the project, is here. Wave, Julie. So our engineers are shy, but she was our project manager on the project, did an outstanding job. Our contractor, Sulutag, is that correct? Which we had never used before, just did an outstanding job of resourcing the job and moving it along. And every time there was an issue to address, they addressed it promptly and just did a fantastic job. So we'll be done here tomorrow, next week, be fully complete with the project. That, of course, is phase one. Future phases, as money becomes available, will include creating the walkway, attempting to get under the railroad bridge to connect to the park, staircase down on the northwest corner, and of course, we will never forget, so the Thomas Anderson Bridge connecting the pedestrian bridge connecting the north and south sides of the walkway. So we look forward, as money becomes available, to doing these projects, but we're delighted at how well this first phase came about.
Great, and the best view of the work that's been done is from Commercial
Right from the Commercial Street, west side of the Commercial Street Bridge, unless you have a friend that lives in one of the north side apartments there on South Block.
Well, congratulations to you and your staff.
Thank you.
That's really good work. It's been fun to follow that over the past years, it seems like. We've been talking about that and all the other pieces you've talked about, so very good. Yeah. We'll do that. Yeah, we'll do the proclamations. Okay. Is that on? There we go. Well, I want to invite up Marion County District Attorney Paige Clarkson, Marion County Victims Assistance Director Susanna Escobedo and Center for Hope and Safety Director Jane Downing for this evening's proclamation. Hello, how are we? Good, thank you. Jane?
I feel like I should do something official with this. Like Vanna. I've got it all.
No, go ahead.
Okay. It's all you, Mayor.
No, it's okay. Whereas the impact of domestic violence extends beyond individuals, reaching into families and communities, and whereas in the last year, Marion County has experienced 4 domestic violence homicide crimes, resulting in the deaths of 5 victims. Whereas the Marion County District Attorney's Office received 1,301 law enforcement reports of domestic violence last year, filed 1,043 domestic violence cases, and filed 74 juvenile dependency cases with domestic violence allegations. And whereas the Marion County Courts received 1,037 requests for protective orders last year, and whereas the Center for Hope and Safety received 30,964 contacts to its program in 2018 and provided 6,639 nights of shelter. And whereas the Marion County Victims Assistance Division provided services to more than 1,700 victims of domestic violence last year, walking alongside them and giving them a voice in the criminal justice process. And whereas we know that we can make a difference by speaking up and reaching out to help victims and survivors, now therefore I, Chuck Bennett, Mayor of the City of Salem, do hereby proclaim October 2019 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month and honor those who have died and acknowledge those who have survived by supporting meaningful services that create safety and hope for people needing help in our community. Dated this 14th day of October 2019. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. It is really our privilege to be here tonight. Like the mayor said, I am Paige Clarkson. I have the privilege of serving as Marion County District Attorney. With me is Jane Downing from Center for Hope and Safety and Susanna Escobedo, who is the director of my Victim Assistance Division. We are delighted to be able to stand here together as those that serve victims and survivors of domestic violence in our community. But the numbers that were just read in that proclamation are indicative of the need for the services that we provide together, the collaboration and the uniqueness of that collaboration in our community. It's very special, but those numbers should be jarring to us. They should be disturbing to us, and it's not good enough that we work together and collaborate on this. We have to do more. And by recognizing this month as Domestic Violence Awareness Month, we're grateful that you have taken a step in doing that here tonight, Mayor and council members, and thank you for having us and recognizing the important efforts that we do together.
Thank you very much. There it is. Go ahead then and have to do that. Mr. Manager, do you want to go ahead on the presentation?
Thank you, Mayor. For the past 4 years, the city has had DHM Research conduct a community survey to gauge resident satisfaction with city services and priorities. John Horvick from DHM is here tonight to provide a brief overview of the 2019 survey, which is a part of tonight's agenda packet. You may recognize John or his voice, as DHM surveys are frequent topics for the media in the Pacific Northwest. John will keep his comments brief to allow time for questions from council. John?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I am John Horvick with DHM Research, the political director there. And it's been a real privilege to be able to work.
Could you pull the mic up there?
Thank you. I'm sorry about that.
No,
So
that's
thank
okay.
you, Mayor and Council. I am John Horvick with DHM Research, the political director in the firm. It's a pleasure to work with your community again. It's very much enjoy being able to talk to Salem residents about how they're feeling. We haven't done the survey since 2016. I'm just going to point out a few highlights from my perspective, some things I would encourage you to be thinking about as you review the full set of data, and also try to provide a little bit of context as we do this work in other communities as well. The first number I want to sort of point your attention to is the satisfaction with city services. So it's a question we've asked in the past. We ask, are you very satisfied, somewhat satisfied, not too or not at all satisfied with city services, just all things considered, not any particular one at this point. And 87% indicated that they were satisfied with city services. That number is just a tick down from years before, but you're also sort of bumping up at the ceiling. It's pretty difficult to get beyond 87%, nearly 9 out of 10. So that's a really excellent number to keep in mind. Some of the real sort of core services as well, if we look at them, police, fire, ambulance, 911, 84% satisfied. Parks and Recreation, 79% satisfied. Water, sewer, stormwater, 75% satisfied. The public library, 74% satisfied. So this is some really very positive numbers you should be very encouraged about. Now, there's also some negative numbers in the survey as well, and I think it's important to point that out as well. A question the pollsters like to ask, as all things considered, is, in this case, Salem headed in the right direction or things off on the wrong track? It's a question that pollsters have been asking for decades and decades across communities, and so we have a real good sense of what the number means and how it compares across time. This year, the right direction number was, I forgot to write it down in my notes here, so let me sort of get to my sheet, 37%. That's down from 66% in 2016, 62% in 2017, 53% in 2018. So certainly that trajectory is notable. Because we asked this question a lot in other places, it helps to give some context of what that number means. In the last year, just some few other communities we've been in, the city of Bend, the right direction number just a few months ago was 59%, Eugene, 54%, and the Portland metro area, so the 3 counties, 44%. Now, we've seen across Oregon a decline over the last few years in communities, especially who have been dealing with homelessness. The right direction numbers in those sorts of places have been on the decline the last few years. And certainly homelessness is a major theme in finding in this survey. We've asked an open-ended question every year since 2016 that sort of asks what's the most important issue in the community. And this year, 41% mentioned something around homelessness. If we go back to the previous surveys, we actually did 2 surveys in 2016, but in March of 2016, it was 7%. December of 2016, it was 17%. 2017, 26%. And last year, 33%, now 41%. That's also a trend we're seeing across Oregon, whether we're talking to folks in Portland, Medford, along the coast, Bend, Eugene, you name it. Many, many communities are dealing with this. Salem as well. Just for a little context, in the Portland metro area, we've asked the same question in surveys going back to 2011, just a few years to give you some sense. In 2011, 1% of Portland area residents mentioned homelessness as the most important issue. 2014, it was 3%. 2017 was 24%. And in late 2018, it was 33%. So this is not specific to Salem. It is something that's happening across the Northwest, across Oregon. It does impact how people are seeing the city. That right direction number is down. If we look across city services, a number of them are down, despite the fact that many of them are very high if you just pull out 2019. But the trend matters as well. So those are 3 things I think you should be paying attention to. Really positive numbers. There is some decline from previous years. Homelessness is increasing quite a bit as a concern and affects how people see the city at large. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes, Councilor Lewis.
The first question about is the city going in the right direction? What would seem to make sense to me is a follow-up question to that would be why or
Sure.
why not? And it may be that the open-ended question gets to the same material, but it's also possible that there'd be a different response.
Yeah.
So why not ask the question to the customer, why?
Sure, that's a great sort of question. And first, I suspect that the numbers would be similar, but right, we didn't ask the question, so we don't know if people give a similar answer or a different answer. With the survey, you're always sort of dealing with pressures of what's important to ask and how much time you have to ask it. And so we wanted to be able to benchmark some of these things across time, and so we did keep some of the open ends the same. Open ends take more time to answer, which means that it takes up valuable real estate to ask other important questions. It's something to revisit, and certainly if in future surveys, that's a valuable question to ask and to be considered with all the other things that might be important.
Councilor Anderson?
Thank you. And follow up to Councilor Lewis's question, I had the same.
Sure.
So we're down to 37%, but as I look at the whole report, seems like the one factor that has gone way up, and you've already discussed that, is homelessness. So in your view, is it appropriate to draw the conclusion that dissatisfaction with the situation with homelessness has also led to concern that we're not going in the right direction?
Oh, I think absolutely that's the right inference to make. Now, is it 100% or is it 80% or 50%? That's harder to say, but certainly there's a strong connection between those two.
And I guess in backing that up, when you look at the other issues that are there, they're all 3, 4, 5, 6, 7%, and those don't seem to have changed over time. So the only thing that has changed to a significant degree is the homelessness situation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
this is more of a general question, and I guess it relates to, what you've been talking about, the regional trends and other trends, and things seem to have gone down in the last year. And you don't need to answer this if you don't feel like you're capable of it with your experience, but is the national trend and what we see in the nation with distrust of government, fake news, et cetera, has that trickled down, in your view, to the local government agencies such as Salem?
To some degree, but I don't think a whole lot, to be honest. When we look at sort of positive or negative feelings about government, usually local government is considerably higher than it is for the state or for the nation. People know their elected officials. They see them at the grocery store. So I don't think that it's to the same extent. I do think that there is, for lots of national reasons, a cutback in local media. And so my concern when I'm out there doing focus groups with community members about some of these issues to go deeper dive is just the lack of knowledge of the ABCs. And that in part's a lack of trust. If you don't know, you tend not to trust. I don't think it's coming from that national political stuff as much. I think it's more the lack of knowledge.
As a follow-up to that, communication and engagement are the things that lead to knowledge of the public, and I know that's been a goal of council, better communication for some time, and judging by the 37%, maybe we haven't done a good job of communicating. So I'm curious as if you have any recommendations based on your surveys in other cities in the Northwest, whether there's something you could recommend to us as the city that we could improve our communications, or a different kind of tact we could take.
Sure. That's a big question. You should ask lots of people. Take my answer for whatever it's worth. One of the challenges that any community is dealing with is the fragmentation of all the different sources and ways we can reach out to people. Some of the traditional ways still work pretty well. Mailings, people tell us that they read them as much as anything else. Local television news is probably as good as medium as anything else, but lots of folks aren't going to pay attention to those, particularly younger people, particularly non-English speakers. And so it's really important to have strategies that are unique to the particular audiences. And certainly I would look around sort of the community who engages at community meetings and ask who's not there, and ensure that those efforts are really sort of pushed towards making sure that those folks who aren't showing up are getting the message.
Councilor Nanki?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So you've only been doing this for us for 4 years then?
So we've been doing community service since 2016, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just because I know we've had similar reports done for probably at least 15 or more. Did you actually look at the questions from previous community surveys?
We might have done that. So once we sort of engaged 4 years ago, but there's been an effort to have benchmarking from year to year to year to see the trends. I'm not familiar as I maybe could be with the work that's done in the past.
Yeah, because I'd actually like to to see some of the old numbers as well.
Sure.
Because we all hear about, the folks in Washington DC, and I think their approval rating is typically less than 10. But we, I think, had this similar question here, and the approval rating was always very high, like in the 80s. And so it would be nice to have that comparable question throughout time as well, which kind of gets to that, if not, why are you dissatisfied, or why do you think we're heading in the wrong direction, and actually just look for an approval number as well, because I don't know how much, if we're going in the wrong direction or the right direction versus are you okay, kind of okay, general approval of a kind of what we're doing here.
I suppose the only thing I really have to say to that is asking consistent questions across time gives you an opportunity to look at that. And there is a difference between a question like, are you satisfied? And are we moving in the, a particular direction? Right. They measure different things. Important to pay attention to both.
And do we have a long-term contract with you? Do you know?
I think this is our last year on contract. I'm looking at Courtney. I can't remember. I think so, yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll have a discussion on questions and what have you as well, and I'm sure.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you much.
Councilor Lewis?
Well, I couldn't help but notice reading through the survey, there's a level of dissatisfaction in West Salem that kind of stands out. So I have two questions. One, is this a new phenomena, or has West Salem stood out in this way historically?
That's a good and fair question. My imperfect recollection is that West Salem has been lower than other parts of the city in the past, although I really would want to go back and look at that before you taking that to the bank. I don't recall off the top of my head for sure.
And the second question, did your research come up with any specific ideas as far as why?
Why West Salem?
That dissatisfaction.
No, you would have to look at, what I would do is try to isolate West Salem and so see how they compare on those city services and see if there are places where they are consistent and maybe where there's a delta to see, maybe we could look at those differences and say maybe that might be it. The sample size for any particular area of the city is not great. So for West Salem, the margin of error would be fairly large for any of those city services. You have to be a little bit careful, but I think it's enough data to say, boy, maybe we need to dig a little deeper, have some further conversations with residents there to try to understand more.
Anyone else? Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Helpful.
Appreciate it.
Okay, public comment. Yeah. And we'll bring up everyone who has signed up for public comment. We only have 4 people who've signed up, at least at this point. Jackie Heavey?
Hi, good evening. My name is Jackie Heavey, and I'm so happy to be here with Salem Main Street Association. As you all know, in the June of this year, all of you at Salem City Council proclaimed the summer of 2019 as a celebration of Salem Alley Days. Fun times were had in our alleys this summer with music and food and vendors, and also the process for the public to name our downtown historic alleys. We went through a process of public input, historic vetting of that input, and then a public voting phase. Salem Main Street Association had a booth in the alleys at our signature downtown events this summer, and we had a paper ballot and an online ballot, and we just received such positive feedback from the community. A story that kind of encapsulates the whole process for us was a mom and a daughter were at First Wednesdays, and they came up to our booth, and they took the historic report, and they were flipping through it with all these interesting Salem stories. And, mom had the paper ballot with her pen, and the daughter was filling it out on her phone. And you just watch them having all of these kind of aha moments about their city and their home. So in total, we had 453 online ballots, 114 paper ballots, for a total of 567 people that participated in naming our downtown alleys. Salem Main Street Association wanted to share with you the results. So in total, we named 8
downtown alleys. You can see in your packet, alley number 9 is being set aside for the Confederate Tribes of Grand Ronde. So all this information is going to be on our website, hopefully by the end of this week. And our hope as an association is just to continue the activation that's happening in our alleys with design and art and the signage that will happen. So if you have any questions about the info,
Well,
happy to answer.
First of all, very good. Thank you very much for doing this.
Sure.
This is one of the harder, probably the other hardest thing to do is public art. So congratulations on getting this far in one piece. Councilor Lewis?
Just one quick question. It looks like, and I'm looking at number 1 and 3, it looks like in some cases the naming stops in the middle of a block. So why not extend it to the next street?
Well, we were within the bounds of the National Historic District. So that's kind of where it limits it.
So that district stops in the middle of...
Yeah, that line is, on the National Historic Register.
Councilor Kaiser?
Thank you. Thanks, Jackie, for coming down. This is a great project. I was really happy to meet with Main Street about it early on, too. And could you describe some of the public outreach that you did for this and the events you were at and how that all worked?
Sure. So we were down at, we set up, and so many people helped out, so many volunteers. We would set up a tent and a table at all the first Wednesdays downtown in the alley, and then also at all the On Your Feet Fridays. And then some local businesses that were on the alleys really got into it and did promotions, and it was just a fun community event for sure to get people involved.
Thank you. And I'm really looking forward to whatever the signage, the promotion, all of that is for our alleyway. So thanks for taking the lead on that.
Yeah, great.
Jackie, when will people begin to see signage, or are they seeing signage? I hadn't noticed them yet.
So not quite yet.
Okay.
So we're going to be working with Public Works and figuring out how that's all going to work with the
And
signs.
the funding for it, how will that be? Do we know yet? Is that the...
That's all
the
being
question?
worked through. Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. Councilor Hoy?
So we're
Oh, I'm sorry,
anticipating that the funding for the signs will be through the Urban Development Department.
Great.
So in a couple locations downtown, we already have put sign poles at the ends of the alleys with business directional signage attached to those.
Great.
So that will be continuing through the downtown at the alley entrances with toppers on each of those sign poles to identify the alley name.
Where would somebody see these poles that are in place now?
So you could see one kind of near Rudy's on Chemeketa Street.
Okay.
At each end of that alley.
Okay.
Electric Alley?
Electric Alley, there we go, yes. Yeah, so that'll be the first one where a topper would go in.
Okay.
And then when we implement the streetscape project, within the sidewalk at the alley entrances, we will also be stamping in the names of those alleys.
Oh, great, okay. Councilor Hoy, did you? No. Nope, okay. Anyone else? Very good, thank you.
Great, thanks.
Marie Kraft.
Thank you. I'd first like to address...
Could you introduce yourself?
I'm sorry, my name's Marie Kraft. I am a homeowner on Front Street.
Okay.
I came to talk about the floodplain, and then I came to talk about a few other issues. One of them was to address your homeless.
Would you wait for the public hearing on the floodplain? We'll have a public hearing on that.
Sure.
Take up
First
your
time,
other-
sorry.
No, that's okay, no,
Okay.
it's not clear.
To address the homeless issue that we have, I'm someone that has experienced getting break-ins, a total of 7 in 1 month back in 2017. And when you report it to your insurance that many times, they drop you. So for the community, because of the homeless situation, it has impacted us, not just seeing it, which is hard, and seeing, how people struggle. They're not all drug addicts. And then also you go home at night, to your bed. And so there's a whole bunch of factors mitigating why all of us feel bad the last couple of years, the homelessness is, and why we kind of feel like the city's not, stepping up. Another thing I'd like to address is it's great having the 30,000 per business but a total of 100,000, that's not much money. And when you're addressing a state that has, a less than 1%, rental rate, and you'd have no transitional housing, you guys aren't addressing the problem. You guys just keep talking about, oh, that's great, what else can we do, what else can we do? Well, what you guys can do is get some transitional housing. It's been in magazines where they're building 180 square foot tiny homes. They're renting them out for $300 a month. You need to find a piece of land where you can build these things. I mean, I'm just a person reading a magazine. I'm sure other people have heard about this. It's not just me. So the problem, why we're losing faith, is because nobody's really addressing the main problem. There's all these secondary problems happening, and that's great, but you guys are putting Band-Aids on it and not addressing the problem, which is a transitional housing issue. Okay, I'm done with that. Does anybody want to comment?
Why don't you finish your testimony? You've only got a minute left.
All right. The last thing I'd like to say is I have a couple sheets of paper here. One of them talks about a high water line for Mental-Bound Park. It says that we're paying a lease payment to the state of Oregon for that, and we haven't been notified as a community because one of the footings is below the high water line. It was a mistake that was made. I've called the mayor several times. I've called the governor. I've even talked to the city manager, Mr. Fernandez, about it. I've not heard back about any of this. The second thing is my property lines were wrong when I bought my house. My property lines are 1880 property lines, and they're grandfathered in, and the city of Salem did not have the right documentation. They were given the documentation because they wouldn't call the state and verify it. We had to go to the state to get the documentation. It's not just my land. All the land that ran along Water Street, they're all 1880 lots. So that's my last thing. They weren't documented right with the city. I'm concerned about it. If it's just that one property, it could be other properties.
All right. Thank you very much. Kara, did you want to just sec? Councilor Kaiser.
I just had a quick question. Thank you. Where along Front Street is your resident, or where is your property?
It's 2515 Front, but it includes several properties.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Matt Hale. Matt.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, councilors. I thought I might be speaking later on in the meeting, so thank you for...
We're giving you a break.
...pushing me forward here. I just wanted to come back and speak just for a few moments. I made some comments at our last city council meeting, and I've gone and done some additional research, so I'd like to share that with you, Mayor, as well as the councilors. So I was asked if I had some specific recommendations where the city might be able to save some money. So I went and looked at the budget, did some math, and my suggestions are as follows. I believe we have a little over 717 FTE in the general fund. So if we take out the police and fire, that's 410. And the remainder, if we did furloughs, 1 furlough per month, 96 hours over a year, I think we can save about $1.1 million over a year. I also looked at the information in the budget for COLA and wage increases. I know they're locked into the current budget, but for future budgets, perhaps that's an additional 1.1 million savings as well. So I just wanted to share that with the City Council and you, Mr. Mayor. And I also wanted to share that I spoke to 7 of our neighbors in a matter of about 10 minutes last week, and I asked, do you support this upcoming fee on our water and sewer bill? And all 7 of them said no, but they would entertain it if it was put to them for a vote. They don't approve of the City Council taking action to do that on their own. They would like to know the situation, they would like to have a voice, and they would like to have a chance to do that as part of a vote. And the last thing I wanted to say was I appreciate the presentation. My light's on, so I've got a minute. And I looked at that presentation online, and I just wanted to read one of the comments that I read. It said, Salem residents are mixed about whether they are willing to pay more for taxes for the services they receive, and support for any proposal would probably depend on the specifics. So I think we just have to communicate, and that's important. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Yes, Councilor Kaiser.
Thank you, Mr. Hale, also for doing your homework. I affectionately call that, but I really do appreciate it, because I think it's important that the public does do those deep dives and to see, and I've noted your recommendations as well, so I do appreciate that.
Well, thank you. You know, just that's one furlough day per month for 12 months for a year, but management could certainly take more than those 12 over the course of the year. So you have the potential to save more than $1 million, 1.1 roughly. You can maybe even get that up to $1.5 million in savings with furloughs.
Councilor Lewis?
I think this is a comment more than a question, but hopefully you recognize that when it comes to furlough days and when it comes to salaries, that the city doesn't get to make the choice. They negotiate with the unions, and it's a two-way street. So it may be a great idea to do that. I know in private businesses do that. They've done that. But it's different. It's different in the public sector.
I appreciate that comment, Counselor. I work for the state, and we didn't have a choice. The state just told us we were going to take furloughs, and it was part of our contract as well. And all of us as loyal state employees, we took those furloughs for several years, plus the wage and salary freezes for many years too. So we did that so we could continue to provide services across the state.
Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah. Yeah. Just introduce yourself. You have 3.
Hi, my name is Connie Wallace, and I live here in Salem, and I just want to make some comments regarding the homeless issue. And I do a lot on my own, but of course one person can only do so much. And my number one concern at this point is that the city, as well as state government, doesn't seem to be putting a whole lot of emphasis on the fact that a very large percentage of the homeless are mentally ill. And this is not debatable. I've even talked to Salem police officers about this, and as recently as last summer, and that officer said that in his experience, probably at least 50%, if not more, are mentally ill, and I mean moderately to severely mentally ill. And I see the evidence of that all the frickin' time. So, housing, yes, of course. When you have people who are mentally ill and they don't even have a safe place to sleep out of the rain, how are they going to find the energy to go out there and investigate other kinds of resources? Having a roof over their head is going to make it to where they have less stress, and whether they're mentally ill or not, you know, that's the number one basic need. Food, water, that's fairly easy to come by. There's places they can go for clothing and all. But housing, I mean, those of us who go downtown in the evening, like say you're going to a movie or whatever, and you see all these sidewalk sleepers, and you see that some of them, more than a few in fact, when it's cold, they don't even have a sleeping bag, some of them. I've seen some without even a blanket. I saw a guy downtown a week ago who didn't even have shoes, bare feet, and the temperature was getting down into the 30s. Now, I don't just talk about it. I bring blankets down and hand them out. And I hope that maybe there's some other people who do that. Because if there's places they can go and get those blankets and sleeping bags, for whatever reason, they're not doing it. And it's not uncommon. 2 nights ago, I saw a lady sitting on the curb. So I have 1 minute. Adjacent to the city center on Commercial, that block that's in between, you know, the library and the convention center, okay? And she's sitting there with her head on her chest, leaning up against the light pole, without a blanket, without a sleeping bag, just the clothes she was wearing. And she's either asleep or passed out, I don't know. But this is what we got going on. So it's not just your, how shall I say this, your ordinary average homeless person that a lot of people have the perception that, oh, these people that like to be homeless, I mean, that's their choice, or they may bad choice, or blah, blah, blah. Well, as most of you know, some while back, the government, I mean, this is state and federal level, emptied out a lot of institutions that used to house mentally ill, okay? And I have a lot of familiarity with that because I had a brother who was in and out of state hospital decades ago. I'm out of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Right, thank you. All righty. Anyone else? All right, thank you. We'll move on then to the consent calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move approval of the consent calendar with the following poll, item 3.2A by Councilor Anderson.
Second by Kaiser.
All right, so we have item 3.2B, which is a resolution dedicating certain real property located along Commercial Street and Southeast and Kubler Boulevard Southeast. Item 3.3A is an intergovernmental agreement with the Housing Authority of the City of Salem for administrative services. And item 3.3B, an order for City Council review of the Planning Commission's decision approving a consolidated application for development of a 3-unit multifamily use for property located at 1175 Nebraska Avenue Northeast. And I apologize if I didn't say item 3.1A, which are the draft City Council meeting minutes from September 23rd, 2019.
Councilor Kaiser.
Thank you. I'd like to register an abstention on item 3.3B.
B.
B as in boy.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, motion passes. Okay, we will move on to public hearings.
The Salem City Council will now hold a public hearing for the purpose of reviewing the hearings officer decision for conditional use in Class 3 Site Plan Review Case Number CU SPR 1904. The applicable criteria are SRC Chapter 240.005D for the conditional use and SRC 250.005F3 for the Class 3 Site Plan Review. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the applicable criteria or other criteria which the person believes to apply to the decision. A failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue shall preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. A similar failure to raise constitutional issues relating to proposed conditions of approval precludes an action for damages in circuit court. The hearing will be conducted with staff presentation first, followed by testimony from the following. The applicant's limited to 10 minutes. The neighborhood associations are limited to 5 minutes. Other interested parties are limited to 3 minutes, and the applicant's rebuttal is limited to 5 minutes.
Very good. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Haley Feitner, and I'm a planner with the Community Development Department. Tonight, I'm here to discuss the conditional use and Class 3 Site Plan Review Case Number 19-04 for the property located at 3625 Portland Road Northeast. At this time, I'd like to request that the staff report, its attachments, and this presentation be entered into the record. The applicant is requesting a conditional use and a Class 3 site plan review required in order to establish occupancy within an existing building for a recreational marijuana growing operation, which requires conditional use approval in the IC zone. Subject property is approximately 1.6 acres in size. It's bounded to the east by Portland Road Northeast and to the west by the Union Pacific Railroad. The property is zoned IC, or Industrial Commercial, and is also located within the boundaries of the Portland Fairgrounds Road Overlay Zone. The property abuts IC properties consistent with the designation between the boundaries of the Portland Road Northeast and the Union Pacific Railroad. Properties across Portland Road are designated CR, or Commercial Retail, and across from the railroad is designated as IG, or General Industrial. This is an aerial of the subject property. There are 2 existing buildings on the lot. The rear portion of the easternmost building, closest to Portland Road Northeast, contains the proposed tenant improvement. The western building contains warehousing and storage uses, and also is used for the production of medical marijuana, which is a use that is permitted outright in the IC zone. The subject property is surrounded by other commercial and industrial uses. This is a site plan of the subject property. The applicant is proposing no exterior changes to the development site with this application. The proposed marijuana production use will occupy the rear 10,500 square feet of the 14,800 square foot building. The site plan includes adequate parking spaces in the existing paved parking lot abutting Portland Road, and the code does not require more for the proposed change of use. This photo is looking northwest from the access on Portland Road Northeast. And the highlighted area shows the proposed location of the tenant space. The front portion is currently vacant. And this photo is looking southwest at the subject property from Portland Road. And this is looking north from an adjacent parking lot located to the south of the building. No comments were received by residents or the neighborhood association. The Salem-Keizer School District provided comments which expressed concern over the siting of this facility adjacent to a school. Their comments are provided in attachment 3 of the report before you. So the subject property is located adjacent to the Career Technical Education Center School, also known as CTEC. The school district's comments and concerns reference state regulations that pertain only to marijuana dispensaries. The applicant is proposing no retail sales with their request, and there are no state regulations that restrict the siting of production facilities adjacent to schools. At the time the school district's comments were received, staff did reach out to the OLCC to confirm this information. Furthermore, the siting regulations are enforced and implemented by the OLCC. State law contains standards for marijuana businesses at a higher level of detail than what's required through the conditional use land use process. An evaluation of the site in relationship to its proximity to schools is not something that is an approval criterion for this application. The hearings officer decision ordered the imposition of conditions to reduce potential impacts of the use from neighboring properties. The conditions require the applicant to install an air filtration system, and it also requires the production use to take place exclusively indoors. The applicant's, like I said, not proposing any exterior changes to the development site and will have an overall net neutral impact. And as mentioned previously, the property does contain an existing medical marijuana production use in the rear building. Medical marijuana production does not require conditional use approval in this zone and is permitted outright. And to staff's knowledge, there are no complaints received on file for this use. Staff recommend that the City Council affirm the hearings officer decision approving the applications. This concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Right, thank you. And we will hear from the applicant next.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you. For the record, my name is Logan Leichman. My address is 5200 Southwest McAdam Street, Portland, Oregon, 97239.
You have 10 minutes.
Yes. I'm here as a representative of the proponent, the applicant, Kelly Bentz, and David Wilborn here. I'll keep my comments brief because I think that the staff report and the hearings officer's decision and conclusions speak for themselves. Respectfully request that you affirm their decision. I just wanted to mention the concern raised over the proximity to school. As Ms. Feitner mentioned, that is not within state regulations. It's not within Salem City Code. There's no restriction against production operations being within any distance of a school. The state and the city have recognized that that's not really a concern if there's no retail sales nearby. I wanted to mention also, not only were no comments received from the neighborhood association, but since this process has started, Kelly and David have been in deep contact with the neighborhood association to make sure that everything they're doing is on the up and up, and they have now actually joined the board of the neighborhood association as well. So they're in it for the long haul, and they're in it to make the community better while they're developing this property. Kelly and this will be a joint venture project. Kelly and David, the joint venture operators, they are experienced with cannabis growing in other facilities as well, and experienced as operators of compliant facilities for years now. With that, again, I respectfully request that you affirm the decisions.
Does anyone have any
And
questions?
I'm available for questions.
Oh, thank you. Yes, Councilor Lewis.
Yeah, maybe I misunderstood. I thought, in essence, this was an issue of the growth of medical marijuana changing to the growth of recreational marijuana. But I'm seeing now that there's going to be additional growing capacity. So the medical marijuana growing will stay consistent, but there'll be an additional amount of growing for recreational. Is that correct?
Yes, as I understand, the existing medical marijuana grow will remain, and this is a separate use.
Okay.
Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. I have some questions about the front part of the building. It's not being used in the operation. Are there plans to later incorporate that, or will that be a separate use? I see it was an estate sale liquidation kind of place. What are the plans there?
I will let the applicants directly speak to those comments about future plans, because I don't want to put words in their mouth.
Why don't we let them come up?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name is Kelly Benz, and I will be the one running the operations mainly with David Wilborn. The back building, just to clear up, is actually a whole nother tenant. As far as I know, they still are medical, but they are a different tenant leasing that property from us. The front part has no plans. We didn't need the extra space, so as of now, there's no plans, but probably just storage currently.
Councilor Anderson.
I take it also from the staff report, and I just want you to confirm this, that the outside of the building is not going to change in any way, shape, or form.
No, the only thing we might do is we do have plans to hopefully add, like other people in the community, maybe more trees and stuff to help that
But
outside.
I guess what you're not going to end up, there's no plans to expand, and also, I don't know what the name of the company is that will be, I mean, it's your company that will be renting.
No, the
and
only thing
using the
different
space.
would, there might be a simple business name on that billboard kind of thing
Okay.
that's in the very front part, but other than that, no.
And what is the name of the business?
It's going to be Premier Oregon.
Okay, okay. So the name marijuana
Nothing
or
with-
cannabis?
yeah,
or
there'll be
anything is
no
not gonna be in
pictures
that?
or
Okay.
words or anything.
Okay, or flashing lights?
No,
Okay.
it's better for everybody.
Okay, thanks.
Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just to clarify, I want to make sure I understood what you said a minute ago. So you own both buildings, but the building in the rear of the property is leased by somebody who's doing a medical marijuana grow. Is that correct? It's not related to the front building.
Currently, Flynn Case owns both buildings, so we're leasing the front building and other tenants are leasing the back building.
Oh, I see. So you're not the owners of the building?
No.
Thank you. I did not understand
No
that.
problem.
And so I understand that you're not planning on any modifications to the exterior. Can you outline what you plan to do to mitigate any odors coming from the building? Like, what's the air? Can you just help us understand that?
Yeah, I'll actually have my builder, Eric Schultz, here explain that, and he actually worked on doing that at another building.
Thank you.
And could you introduce yourself, Eric?
Yeah, for the record, thank you everybody for your time today. My name is Eric Schultes. I represent Esday Building and Construction. I am architecturally trained, and I've been in building and construction and design for the last 20 years. I'm the designer of this facility, which is blueprinted after a successful cannabis grow that we built about 2 years ago for my client here and others in a project in Milwaukee, Oregon. It's a Tier 2 project, which is approximately twice the size of the proposed project here. The canopy for this building is about 5,000 square feet, whereas a Tier 2 project is about 10,000 square foot of cannabis canopy. The reason I mention the project that is precedent in Milwaukee, Oregon, where my business is located, is that it is located precisely 1 block away from the OLCC. We have on a regular basis joggers and walkers that at lunchtime and other parts of the day leave the OLCC and walk around the road that is adjacent to our cannabis grow. We have not had any complaints in the 2 years that project has been there. Additionally, that project is in a building that is much larger. It's a flex space property, which means it has multiple tenants inside the building as well. And so we have close to 20 different tenants inside the space that we all share adjacent, wood shops and grocer support and just G-diapers is in there. We've got a lot of neighbors and none of them deal with odor or smell from our project. I am the individual who actually firsthand installed the odor mitigation system. It's an internal system, so there are no external parts or pieces that would be appendages that would be visible to the community. It's basically it's about a 5 foot tall, 2.5, 3 inch thick carbon tube that air is circulated through. And so each of the growing rooms has its own recirculation device, which removes the odor in the room itself. And then we have additional filters that are in what we call the cabin area that filter any outbound air before it is recirculated, so we can bring in fresh air for people that work there. We also, when we run the exhaust systems, we tend to, when we bring makeup air in, those are always run at night. So from the hours of basically 10, 11 at night till 7 in the morning, that is when those are run. I'm not saying nor suggesting that odor comes with that, but when we bring our makeup air in, we do that during the nighttime hours. So it's just not a part of anybody's day-to-day experience.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. So just to clarify, so typically during the day, during the non-extra air time, you would not expect any odor on the outside of the building. Is that correct?
You won't expect any, period.
Okay.
And so during the daytime, everyone kind of sets their clock differently in terms of how they grow. The sort of the method that this is sort of modeled after is that during the daytime hours, the filtration system will just be an in-house filtration system. So there should be really no exterior exhaust that's even in the equation.
Thank you.
Councilor Anderson?
I can't tell from the picture up there and the picture in our packet, but between CTEC and this proposed business, is there a fence or is it open between the school part and your property you're developing?
That's a great question. Without a laser pointer, do I have permission to kind of go up and point?
Sure. Could you have it close? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I could. Is this up here?
Just don't talk while you're up there.
Yeah, so if you can still hear me.
No, we can't hear you, and we don't want to hear you from there. Yeah. We need to have you on a mic.
Just point.
Okay, great. Yeah, so at that corner there, you see kind of a line that's to the left of that gray rectangle, the unoccupied area in the building. So there's a line that comes off to the left. That is a fence line. And then there's another fence line that runs all the way to the rear corner of this property. I can say firsthand, because of the tenant that's in the back, as well as just I think general practice, that fence is locked, is padlocked at all times. So there's actually no way to get into any other portion of the site as it stands. It's basically like a private driveway next to a public road on the other side of that line, and you can sort of see where that that top to bottom sort of pocked line has sort of half of a driveway on either side of it.
Does part of your design include some sort of enhanced security beyond this fence at the building site itself? Do you do quite a bit of enhanced security?
I can speak to that because that is in the OLCC requirements. All production facilities, all licensees, all licensed premises are required to have what you would probably consider an enhanced security system, which includes surveillance cameras, no access to anybody except for licensed and authorized personnel.
That's managed by whom?
The licensee. And yes, with locks on the doors, with alarms, with motion sensors. It's a comprehensive security system that's required as a condition of licensing.
Have you talked with the school district and kind of mitigated their concerns yet? Have you talked with them?
Until this meeting was called, we didn't know there was any questions or concerns, so we just haven't been reached out. If someone did reach out or if I had a name of who I talked to, we were always going to be a welcome to conversation about this.
Okay.
Because when we attended the neighborhood association, no one had mentioned it, so as far as we knew, everything was fine until this meeting was called.
It didn't come up during the hearing?
No.
Okay.
No one attended the hearing but us.
But was there a written communication, do you recall? You didn't know until tonight that the school district is opposed to this?
There was the written comment that was submitted.
Well, that's their point.
It did not reference any specific concerns aside from if this were a retail application, then it wouldn't be permitted, but the response to that is that it's not a retail application. So they didn't address any specific concerns, but we believe that the conditions of approval requirement that the use be completely located indoors and the odor control system are sufficient to address those concerns.
Does the school district think it's sufficient? Do you know yet?
We don't know because they haven't
They were at your,
raised those
they
additional
presented
concerns.
testimony at your hearing, as I understand it. Maybe I misunderstood the timing on that.
No, there was no one at the conditional use hearing, and then
Okay.
we heard from Haley that there was going to be a city council meeting regarding this, and then we heard that it was from the school and it was regarding the retail. And that's all we had heard about the school having any questions about us being there.
Correct. The school district didn't show up to the hearing. They just provided written
Did they
testimony.
submit written testimony?
Yes.
So they did show up. I mean,
Right, but they didn't testify at the hearing. They submitted
but they were on the record at the hearing in
as
opposition.
having concerns if it was going to be retail.
And that's it? They just said retail? Okay.
Yes.
And you're not going to retail?
Yeah. And it should be noted that any attempt to switch to that would require further council action, and it also just would never be approved because OLCC does consider that to be a school that meets the 1,000-foot distance requirement, and so they would never grant approval for that anyways.
Okay, Kelly, we've heard from you. Do you need to say anything more? I've got you on my list.
No, I just would like to thank Haley and the planning committee for working on this and for all of you tonight. And we are always welcome to answer more questions or address any issues. We know this is kind of a new thing sometimes for people, so we definitely want to be open to any concerns people have.
Okay, and David, did you want to? Okay. Okay, that's everybody. Thank you. Unless you have anything else for right now. And you'll have a chance to rebut anything that comes up when we talk with the staff, so, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Is there anyone else who wanted to testify on this issue? All righty. Questions for staff? Councilor Kaiser?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in the staff report on page 2, there's a sentence here that says, it's page 2, the third paragraph. kind of in the middle of the third paragraph, because the existing medical marijuana production facility did not receive approval for the change of use and occupancy, the request statement is being corrected to indicate that the proposal establishes occupancy for the proposed use.
I couldn't hear you very, could you?
Am I reading that correctly, that when this was a medical marijuana facility, it didn't actually have approval to be that?
So I wanted to clarify that in the record because the request statement indicated that they were asking for a change of use from a medical marijuana production facility to a recreational marijuana production facility. And that was not the case for this particular building. So I wanted to put in the record that they are establishing occupancy for this new agriculture use for this building.
So, but does that mean before this application, like when this building was being used as a medical marijuana processing facility, that it didn't actually have approval to do that? That it was operating without a conditional use?
So the medical marijuana production does not require conditional use. The building permit history and looking back, they did receive some permits for that. They did not go through site plan review approval. So that conditional use process isn't required for that medical. So I just wanted to clarify that that this wasn't going from the medical production use to the recreational production use.
It's just going from whatever it is now to.
I'm not clear I'm still not clear on this now.
So the building permit history is a little bit shaky for this.
Shaky, you said?
For this particular building. It does have occupancy. It did have occupancy for retail sales previously for Kelly's like a garden center use.
Right.
So it was never anything that had to do. It had some warehousing and storage, and because the addressing for the building to the rear is the same as the addressing for the building that contains the proposed tenant improvement, that's where some of the confusion was, and that's where it was corrected.
Okay, and then if I can continue.
Oh, yeah, you go ahead.
So the way it's zoned right now, which is IC, I'm not sure. IC, medical marijuana production is permitted outright. That's correct?
Yes.
Right. You don't need a conditional use. So for the building in the rear of the property right now, that's completely fine. They can stay medical marijuana processing. This is for basically the front of the building. I guess it's maybe not a big deal. I just was confused about if it needed to have a conditional use as a medical marijuana, and it didn't. It's what it sounds like is it was kind of operating under the radar perhaps without going through something that.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to clarify.
It's an outright permitted use within the, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I have one other question, and that is the conditional use is applied to the entire property, not just the building, but the whole property. So that rear building could also later be turned into a recreational processing as well. Is that correct?
Yes. So because it is an agriculture use, it would go from agriculture to agriculture because it's still under the same use classification. There was no particular, I guess, clarification that it runs just with the building that is easternmost that we are discussing today.
So it would just apply to the front building?
It does run with the land.
It runs with the land, but it only applies to the front building, not the rear building.
Councilor Kaiser, Lisa Anderson-Ogley, the planning administrator, we would consider that an expansion of a conditional use, and we would require either a new conditional use permit or modification to the one on file to expand the
and then
use.
I have one final.
I'm just having a real hard time hearing what you're saying.
Sorry. So the question was if the conditional use permit applied, if it's approved tonight for the front building, if they could just start doing recreational marijuana growing in the rear building under that permit. So I was just clarifying that would be an expansion of the conditional use. So if they were going to expand into the back building, we would require either a new conditional use permit or modification to this permit.
These two buildings are under one owner.
Yes.
The back building status is what?
Medical marijuana growing.
Without a site plan review? I mean, has it been through the process?
At the At that time, we didn't have a site plan review process, so it did not have to go through site plan
Okay,
review.
so it's in perfect shape.
It
Okay.
appears to be, yes.
Yes, it appears to be.
It appears to be.
It's hard to track with the records before site plan review. And if buildings haven't changed use in a really long time, we don't have a lot of permit history. And people don't always realize just moving into a building that even though they're permitted use in that zone, that they might need to go through change of use so that our records reflect their use. So a lot of times people just lease buildings and start operating there, and we may never know that they're there if we don't receive any complaints. So, and as Haley mentioned, having two buildings with the same address is not
Yeah.
the way it should be. So the records are confusing because they both had the same address.
Will
But
that all be cleared up then in this process? Will we have a designated address for this building so that
we can talk to building and safety about the addressing for the property for sure.
something to kind of distinguish what's going on here?
Yes, we can talk to
It might
building
be
and safety
helpful.
about
I don't
that.
know.
Yes.
I had one final, if I
I'm
can.
sorry.
Thank you. This is more for my own understanding is with the conditional use, those are applied for by a tenant or a property owner. Does the owner have to consent to
Yeah.
that conditional use?
Yes, they have to sign the application.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
Have they?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just
Yes.
checking.
Property owners are always
I don't want to see
required to
this
sign.
compounding
Yeah.
over time into a more confusing situation. Counselor Hoy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make sure I'm understanding the current situation. My understanding has completely changed since this hearing started, which isn't always comforting, because I thought I understood what we were doing here tonight, and now I have a different understanding. So just to be clear, we have one property, one owner, two separate lessees, two people, two different entities leasing two different buildings, correct?
At minimum, those are the only two that I know of.
Okay. We have a medical marijuana facility, growing facility on the rear part of the property that is impacted in no way by whatever decision we make tonight. Is that correct?
They would have to receive, yes, a modification of the conditional use approval.
So any decision we make tonight will only impact the easternmost building that we've been discussing, that to, as best I can tell, has never been any sort of grow facility.
Correct.
It was used to be, I remember when it was the Kellys or something, it was a garden center, and it's never, so this is a brand-new use. So we're now going to have growing facilities in both buildings on this property. Is that correct so far?
Correct.
All
Yes.
right, I'm good, okay. I'm following. And so, I think that's all of my questions. I think that, so anything, just to be really clear, anything that we decide tonight will not have any impact on that medical facility, is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Counselor Anderson?
Thank you. The medical facility is a grow facility, just like the proposed conditional use will be, correct?
They're both production facilities.
Okay. So there is no, on the medical production facility, they're not selling there, they're growing it to supply to a medical marijuana distributor who is selling it someplace else. And the same would be true in the proposed use. They're growing it to supply to somebody who will be selling it for recreational marijuana.
Correct.
And do we have any idea how long the medical marijuana grow has been there?
I'm thinking 2007, 2008 by the permit. It
Okay,
is
so
definitely
10
there, yeah.
to 12 years. Okay. Then this is, again, just for me, but the school district is in an IC zone. So schools are allowed in IC zones?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Counselor Lewis?
Okay, I'm curious. If the application was for an additional or a second medical marijuana grow, what would be the process that these folks would have to go through?
They would have to go through, so if they were going from a different change of use to an agriculture
No, I'm
use.
talking about an additional medical growing facility, just like the one in back.
So if the building permit occupancy was on file for an agriculture use, then the only thing that they would need to do is if they had a building permit to apply for a building permit. If the previous use on file was not for an agriculture use, then they would also have to go through site plan review approval for the medical. They would not have conditional use approval with that, just the site plan review that we process for change of uses.
That's not, Councilor Lewis, that's not a public process, so it's not a public hearing, and we don't send notice. It's just done with the building permit.
Right. Growing is growing.
Any further questions? Does the applicant want to rebut anything? Or clarify or augment?
Thank you.
You bet.
Again,
Your
Logan
name
Lakeman
again.
for the record.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify, and I think that was done through the questions, that these are two separate buildings. We are not seeking approval for anything related to the medical marijuana grow in the back. This is only for the conditional use permit for the recreational grow in the front. They are two separate tenants. There was mention about the building permit history of the building for which we're seeking permit. Should be noted that those, any deficiencies in the permit records were under previous tenants. This group began leasing the property, I think, in 2018, and have been going through this process since then. So unlike other applicants that were mentioned, or other tenants who were mentioned, and people who just move in and start working without getting the permits, these applicants are seeking their permits. And the word processing was mentioned. I just wanted to clarify again that no processing is being sought, no cannabis processing, only cannabis production, growing.
Well, so you're not cutting it off or anything like that? No? I mean, aren't you going to package it up or something?
Harvesting, I mean in the sense of the defined terms and the different types of licenses issued by OLCC. Processing includes extraction, that sort of thing. This is just growing and harvesting.
Okay. Okay. No what?
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? Any questions? Okay. Close public hearing. Councilor Ossick, what's your pleasure?
I think just based on the based on the hearing, I move that we approve the planning administrator's decision.
Okay. Second by Anderson. Any discussion? Councilor Kaiser?
Thank you. I'm going to support the motion. I do have a recommendation to the applicant, and I would really encourage you to reach out to the school district. Now that you know that, I think it's just they're very important in our community, and there will be very important neighbors for you to have. I think it would be really helpful for them to learn just about the differences between retail versus just growing also, but I would really encourage you to do that.
Councilor Anderson?
I would second that. We, as a community and the council, have decided that CTEC is a very, very important part of our community. We've given it lots of grant money, and we want it to be successful. So it, we ask about fences, but I'll quote Robert Frost, good fences make good neighbors. And so you ought to go and talk to those people. The other thing, we had this a long time ago in council, not long time ago in my tenure. We were discussing medical marijuana and recreational and how we were going to control it by our zoning codes. And we all kind of came to the conclusion that this is an OLCC thing, not a city thing. We were talking about how far from schools and how close from one dealership to another dealership, and we just felt like that was really an issue for OLCC. So according to the staff report, any issues that are related to here will be taken care of by OLCC, and it's a conditional permit. It's legal, and so I think we ought to vote for it.
Councilor Hoyt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to clarify, this is an affirmation of the hearings officer's decision and not the planning administrator's decision,
right,
which I think is maybe what the motion said. So I don't know if that's an issue or not, Mr. Attorney.
Nope. Great. Okay.
Staff recommendation.
Yeah, I will just, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Councilor Menke.
Thank you. And speaking to legalities, it's still not legal at the federal level, so I swore an oath to support that law from our uppermost governing body as well, so I will be voting in opposition to the motion.
Okay. Yeah, I want to join the other counselors. If you haven't talked to that school district, do it tomorrow. Just get there as quickly as you can and get these issues with them clarified and resolved to the extent you can do it. I'm just really surprised that this didn't come to us with a clearer understanding of their concerns or you all having some sort of resolution. So I just really think that would make your lives a lot simpler over time. And that is, we have $2.5 million invested in that Career and Technical Education Center. It's part of a long-term workforce plan, and you're building a facility that does not augment our workforce. It's great. I mean, you're in a legal business, but we're not really looking for a situation where our kids are using marijuana, and it just makes everyone nervous. But Councilor Anderson described, I think, correctly the way we have approached this, which is if you're legal, you're legal. And then whoever owns this place ought to get that back building figured out. It just sounds kind of, I don't know if you all are working with this person, but that really created, I think, a total misimpression as to what was going on here. So, okay. All those in favor of the motion say aye. 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 All opposed? Motion passes.
Be consistent.
Our next one.
Salem City Council will now hold a public hearing concerning amending SRC Chapter 601, the Floodplain Overlay Zone. The criteria applicable to the proposed amendment is SRC 110.085B1 and 2. Testimony must be directed toward the identified criteria or other criteria the person believes to apply to the decision. The hearing will be conducted with staff presentation first, followed by other interested persons. Neighborhood associations are limited to 5 minutes per association for testimony, and individuals testifying are limited to 3 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, I'll open the public hearing. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor Bennett and councilors. My name is Glenn Davis. I'm the Chief Development Engineer and Floodplain Administrator for the Public Works Department. Ordinance 17-19 has a unique story that is very important to why it's here and what needs to be adopted. First, I'll start with some regulatory background. The federal government administers what is called the National Flood Insurance Program, or NFIP. Participation in this program is voluntary for each local community. However, consequences of non-participation are quite severe. If a community wants to buy flood insurance or receive federal disaster funding or receive federal grants and loans, we must participate in the NFIP. So non-participation means we don't receive many of the benefits of federal disaster assistance. So I'll also mention that the Salem's floodplain program was approved through a state and federal audit called a community assistance visit a couple years ago. So moving to recent events, the city of Turner is actually in a process, the final stages of getting flood maps from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA. Unrelated to their mapping, FEMA and the state of Oregon finalized a model ordinance in August of this year and then also in August, Salem received notice that we need to update our ordinance to match the statewide model ordinance, and their expectation is that it's adopted verbatim. So the state of Oregon notice also mentioned that we need to adopt our ordinance no later than October 18th of this year. If we want to remain in the NFIP without consequences, the deadline is this Friday. Today's Monday. So one other piece of background relates to public outreach. Staff sent an email to interested parties, also sent out over 5,000 direct mail notices to flood-prone properties. We also published notices in the Statesman Journal and on the city website. We received dozens, probably hundreds of phone calls and emails, and I hope to address those issues here tonight. So next I want to explain a few key terms. The first is base flood elevation, or BFE. Here on the screen we see a channel at low flow with surrounding riparian area. The base flood is also known as the 100-year flood, or the 1% chance flood. So the base flood elevation is simply the water surface elevation during the base flood, or the 100-year flood. And it's shown as a dashed line on the screen where the water would come up to during that 100-year flood. The next term is substantial improvement. The NFIP has a goal of getting older buildings in the floodplain upgraded to current standards. So one tool that FEMA uses is to require buildings to be brought into compliance for these major renovations while allowing the minor ones to take place without requiring significant upgrades. So you can see here on the left side of the building, left side of the screen, an older building that was built below the BFE. When the building undergoes a substantial improvement, then the NFIP requires that the building and utility equipment be upgraded and elevated to meet current standards, as you can see on the right. So substantial improvement is defined as a project having a construction cost equal to or greater than 50% of the structure's current value. So if the structure has, for example, a $200,000 value, a renovation project less than $100,000 would not be a substantial improvement, and a project of $100,000 or greater would be a substantial improvement that would require the building and utility equipment to be upgraded. The last term is the Community Rating System, or CRS.
You can't hear him? Okay, speak more clearly, would you? They're having trouble understanding what you're saying. Just,
I can go back.
yeah, go back a little bit.
Thank you. So if a structure has a $200,000 value, then a renovation project less than $100,000 in cost would not be a substantial improvement, where a project of $100,000 or greater in cost would be a substantial improvement and would require the building and utility infrastructure to be elevated. So the last term to define is that Community Rating System, or CRS. CRS is a program that offers flood insurance premium discounts to communities that exceed minimum standards. The better a community exceeds the minimum standards, the better the CRS score and the greater the discount. Currently, Salem residents receive a 25% discount on flood insurance premiums, and ours is actually the highest discount being offered in Oregon, along with 2 other cities. So next, I want to explain what has not changed with this ordinance. The federal and state laws have not changed, flood insurance policies have not changed, floodplain boundaries and BFEs have not changed. This Chapter 61 of SRC still exists to implement the state and federal rules as it did before. So I will add that FEMA has placed strict limitations on what we can do here. As I mentioned earlier, FEMA requires that this model ordinance be adopted verbatim. Second, because we have a mandatory deadline that ends on this Friday, staff has received some requests to make some other changes to this ordinance, but we simply have not had enough time to consider those changes, and those would have to come at a later time. So I'll close my presentation by pointing out what is being changed in this proposed ordinance. As depicted on the screen, the current regulation for new construction and substantial improvements requires that the floor of the building must be elevated 1 foot above the BFE. But the utility equipment, like this AC unit here, must be elevated 1 foot less, merely just to the BFE. So the proposed ordinance requires that the utility equipment be elevated 1 additional foot above the BFE to match what was required for the structure only for new construction and substantial improvements. So this change is motivated by the community rating system. Without making this change, Salem cannot obtain any greater discounts on flood insurance because this change is considered a prerequisite for making any further improvements to our CRS rating. I personally spoke to the Home Builders Association about this change, and they had no objection because it has a negligible impact to new home construction and renovations. So staff recommends the council conduct second reading and adopt Ordinance 17-19.
Right. Thank you very much. We'll ask staff questions after we hear from the public, so thank you. Marvin Sands. 3 minutes, Marvin, and then the red light will go on.
I'm Marvin Sands. I live at 640 15th Street Northeast, and I'm in the...
Pull that mic up to you.
I'm in one of the designated floodplains. I've been in that house since 1975. Some of the neighbors have asked me about this. My flood policy, when we had the flood in 96 and we got flood water, the storm drains and the sewer were connected. And we had flood water come up in our unfinished basement. We had 14 inches of water in the basement. The flood policy that was required by the mortgage began at, I think, $700 or $900 annually. Today, that policy is just a little bit short of $6,000 a year. So I don't know what's going on with this thing. I think what's happened is that this federal flood program is collecting money and then it filters down to local governments. I think that's what's going on. Why is, I mean, we're next to Mill Creek by North Salem High School on 15th Street. That is a very steep run for Mill Creek. And the neighbors, they're not going to have it. Why are we insuring? This isn't the Mississippi Delta that we're talking about here. So I don't know what's going on with these premiums. I've been talking about this since about 99. The neighbors talk to me. There are people that can't afford these premiums. I'm lucky that I have some property that I'm going to pay off the house so that I don't have to pay this premium. But I don't know what's going to happen to these neighborhoods. We can't pay these premiums for insurance. We're going to gentrify all of that floodplain and only wealthy. I don't know what's going to happen, but this is insane. $6,000 a year for to insure this is crazy. So anyway, the neighbors asked me to come here and talk. I guess I have a reputation for being a little outspoken here, so I don't know what we can do, but I oppose this. Whatever they're doing here, I oppose it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Marvin. Any questions for Marvin?
Oh, I'd like to ask, could I ask Director Hernandez, does the Salem have a hydrologist on their staff?
We'll ask staff for you, Marvin, when we get to that,
you.
okay? Thank you. Just keep that in mind, would you? Greg and Llewellyn Beiser?
Hello, I'm Greg Beiser, and this is my wife, Llewellyn.
I'm Llewellyn Beiser.
And we just purchased a house in Salem Town in West Salem July 2nd. And then we got this letter about being in the proposed, I guess it's the 500-year floodplain. I was wondering when we look out our back deck, we look over a farmer's field, and the river is on the other side of the trees, and our house is probably 50 feet above, I'm assuming. I don't know. I don't know what the elevation is, but we're quite a ways up. So I was very surprised to see that the back of the house is considered to be in the gray area shown as the, I don't know if it's the 100-year or it shows 100-year, 500-year, the FEMA flood zone. And I just wanted to have more clarification because I don't see water getting up that high. And our house is built on a foundation totally covered with concrete underneath. So I didn't know if there's waivers that can be put on our property or what would be involved with this.
We will have staff prepared to answer your questions, and he's going to give you his card as well so he can go over with you what your situation is.
Very good.
Yeah,
well, thank you.
See what we can at least find out for you. This is a federal program, but we understand exactly. I live not far from Marvin, so I'm listening pretty careful to what he's got to say.
Yeah, it's just seems amazing. I've been in some...
Could you get a little closer to the mic?
I've been in some severe flooding in Texas when I lived there, and I cannot imagine with all that farmland that the Willamette River is going to go 40 feet up and even hit the foundation of our house, which our house is above the foundation another 5 feet. And we're on clear up on an embankment or a bluff, that we look clear down onto the farmer's field and out to where the river is. So it's just very shocking to me to see this.
Yeah, yeah.
I was kind of thinking that this downtown Salem would be underneath 30 feet of water.
That's pretty much what it's describing, isn't it? Yeah.
This just seemed kind of phenomenal. I mean, the 500-year flood it can be phenomenal, but I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your questions, and we'll get some answers to them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Charles, can't read it. Mangum? You signed up. Would you like to speak?
Sure.
Yeah, you got 3 minutes. You can say anything you want.
Yes, my name is Charles Mangum. I have a piece of property at 5144 36th Avenue Southeast. And I also received the letter of map revision for the property. And I came down to the city and talked to Robin Dahlke, and then I also went to the county and talked to Brandon Reich. And the one thing, it's got the wrong name on the property. The street is 36th Avenue, not 74th Avenue, which is a minor thing. But the fellow at the county says that happens all the time.
Really?
So
It's
I
just
said,
around the corner?
Yeah,
Is that
down 36 blocks and you're fine.
Yeah.
You know? But anyhow, I was here just to. It shows that I'm out of the floodplain, which is a wonderful thing.
That is.
They both said, well, you're lucky.
Yeah.
And, but as I look out at the property, I can't tell an elevation change difference going on between my property and the one across the street, or road. So I was just here to.
Are you trying to get onto this man? I'm this man?
I'm simply here to gain more information about this.
And the fellow right behind you will help you out.
All right, sounds
He's here
good.
to
That's
help.
all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming down. Carol Marie Kraft.
My name is Marie Kraft. One of the things I'd like to say is I have not received the map that shows if I'm in or out. I did receive the letter. I live right on the river, and it does come up quite high. We've never had it crest this side. I mean, it would be in the city if it did. But one of my concerns is the people that do have the high insurance, like the gentleman said earlier, the $6,000 a month. Does this new change require them, if they're within a foot of the flood water, that they have to build up? Is that what that gentleman was saying?
He'll be up there and be glad to answer your question.
I'm sorry?
I said he's right up there and he'll be glad to answer your question.
Perfect.
Would
All
that
right.
be okay?
That's it.
Okay, thanks a lot. And Yvonne Webster.
Good evening, I'm Yvonne Webster. I own a property at 1899 Kennard Northwest. I received something about the plane information, and so my issue is kind of, basically I live 4 blocks from Orchard Heights Park. Orchard Heights Creek is at the back of my property, and that's not my problem. My problem is the overwhelming of the sewer systems in front of my home. Twice on my birthday, September 8th, 19, I had 2.5 feet of water come through my property. This is the front of our street. Coming all the way up to my knees, and my property is the only driveway that's down in the neighborhood. So when the sewer gets overwhelmed, it all rushes through my property. And when I pay $3,500 in taxes a year, this is not what I want. So I would like somebody to be accountable in fixing this. Operations came out to my property and they put a dam this big at the bottom of my driveway. When you're dealing with 2.5 feet of water in your boots, it's almost insulting.
Yeah.
So I would like, please, somebody to address this issue for me and my neighbors as well, because it goes through my property and back into my neighbor's property and out to the creek.
Okay.
The creek has never been a problem, but the problem is the design of the sewer system right there.
Okay. I'm going to have the Public Works Director. Might as well have you go right to the top and.
Yeah, that's what I need. That's why I'm here.
There's your man.
All right, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Anyone else want to testify on this matter? Yes.
Hi, my name is Connie Wallace again, and I just want to make a few comments about the fact that, number one, the subdivision where I live is about 22 years old. And back in the day, and I understand this has been changed, as I had a conversation with somebody in Public Works recently, but there was an admission by that person in Public Works that, yes, back in the day, 1997 we're talking about, that builder and probably various others were allowed to build too close to the creek. Now, my property abuts Croydon Creek out near the intersection of River Road and Croydon Creek, and it goes under the little culvert thing, I guess. And the portion of the creek behind my house is very narrow. It's like maybe 10 feet across, and maybe in the summer, there's hardly any water. But the distance between the top of the embankment and the creek bed is maybe, I want to say, not even 6 feet. So when you've got a very narrow, shallow channel and a whole lot of rain coming down, it's going to flood. So two questions, and obviously my interest is, number one, mitigating damage, lowering the risk if possible. Flood insurance doesn't do squat to prevent the damage. And I've been through having my home flooded in the past, and it was sheer hell. So I would like to figure out how can I prevent damage to my home. Now, unfortunately, these homes in my subdivision are also very close to the street in front, too close to the creek in back, and a very shallow front yard, so you don't have a lot of permeable ground. It's all this concrete and not very much distance. The water floods the street. A few years ago, you couldn't even drive your car unless you had a really, high rig. And so when you've got a situation where the storm drains empty into the creek, okay, they go under the ground, da-da-da. And so here's the storm drain thing sticking out. I forget what you call that pipe, but anyway, when the water in the creek is up here and the pipe's here, no more water is going to go in the creek from the front. So that's why the street gets flooded. So you got it, water coming up in the backyard towards the back of the house and coming up towards the front of the house to the garage in the front. And it's pretty terrifying. And I think there are two possible solutions, but I just don't know if the city is interested in undertaking these. And number one would be to dredge the channel. And my understanding is that the state would be the one that would have to approve that. Is that correct?
I think that's correct.
Yes, and that's a lot of work, and even if all of the homeowners in the area were willing to chip in and pay for it, that there would still be some difficulty in getting that approved. True?
From my knowledge, yeah.
Well, it is true.
But do not, I am not the city hydrologist. That guy is right there.
Got it. Okay, so I'm about to run out of time here. The second option that I have investigated, that I have researched, is building a big honking berm. And I was told, well, that would be hard to get that approved because then the water just gets channeled elsewhere. It doesn't really solve the problem, except maybe my home is less likely to be damaged.
Yeah.
So
Let me let you talk with Mr. Fernandez, our Public Works Director, and kind of get, he's really the person you'll need to talk to on this. So I appreciate you coming down.
Okay.
Did you have any thoughts on the ordinance at all?
Well, the ordinance doesn't really provide anything one way or the other in terms of prevention of flooding.
Okay.
It's just a formatting deal, am I correct? And it's required. I mean, the city has to comply with the state, case closed. So, no, I don't have any objections to the revisions.
Great, thank you very much.
I'd like to investigate. Okay, I think the city has an obligation to help homeowners who live in the city of Salem try to prevent the flooding in the first place. If
Here's the guy to make your case to, right there. Thank you very much. Okay, anyone else? Anyone want to talk to Glenn now? There he is. Any questions?
If I can
Councilor
have
Hoy?
briefly, the city recorder had mentioned that I had failed to mention that we need to engross the ordinance as part of this. So, sorry, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a question on something you said at the beginning of your testimony. You talked about, as I understood you to say, that we're required to adopt this ordinance verbatim. And then you said that there are some changes that you're considering, but we don't have time to do that now, but we'll consider them at a future date. Those two things don't match up in my brain.
I apologize. So if we can add certain elements if they don't conflict with what's already written, but the change we're talking about is more restrictive, and more restrictive changes could get audited by the state and federal agency. And so we went through this particular issue with them that they're familiar with because it's this CRS issue. So every change had to be reviewed specifically by the state regulator and forwarded to FEMA. And we had a number of them denied, almost all of them. This is the one that actually was able to get approved through that process. It's the only one that was accepted.
Okay, thank you. Follow up to that. You mentioned that this is a prerequisite for any future reductions in rates for the ratepayers. What's the next potential reduction?
They're 5% increments, so there's a number of what are called Class 4 prerequisites, lower's better. So this is one of many of those prerequisites that we're working on. We plan to get those accomplished here, hopefully by the early next year.
What's the maximum reduction that we're hoping to attain?
A Class 1 is a 45% reduction.
Thank you.
But I would warn council that there are some very painful regulations to get to 45%. So even at this level, even if to get to a Class 3, which is 30%.
Class 4 would be 30%, Class 3 would be 35%.
35%.
Yeah.
There's going to be some very painful conversations that we're going to have with council and with the community to achieve it. So it gets significantly harder. We're supportive. We're working on it. We're going to bring them forward. But I warn you that it'll be hard.
Thank you. Councilor Lewis?
Go over the, what I'll call the punishment phase. If we don't adopt this, FEMA's going to not be nice to us, and they're going to do this and do that. Go over that part again.
FEMA has a sanction process for those who are not in compliance. The sanction process is that no flood insurance policies can be written, no federal loans or grants can be offered on structures in the floodplain. That most home loans have federal elements to them, so that's most home loans, and no federal disaster assistance would be available. So it's a pretty steep problem.
Quite substantial.
Yes.
Another question, I'm thinking this is coming around full circle to me. Berms. The rules, the FEMA rules don't recognize berms unless they're an official berm. And I'm talking specifically about the issue in West Salem, near the river. The highway acts as a berm, but it's not counted as a berm because it's not an official berm. Therefore, we have to pretend that it's flat, and those properties now in West Salem are going to be in the floodplain. Is that right?
Yes and no.
Okay.
The current maps that are adopted do not show those in the floodplain today. FEMA's policies today would say that if the maps were redone by them, because they make the maps, their policies would likely remove those berms. So if the maps are redone, then yes, they probably would be ignored.
Okay, so that's the next phase. Last question for me. I thought these rules were being challenged not only by the federal legislature but also in the courts. Is that still true?
Are
these rules being challenged anywhere?
Are you speaking of the Endangered Species Act, as far as you know?
No, I'm talking about the floodplain rules, the FEMA floodplain rules. It's my understanding that they've been challenged, and I didn't know if that challenge had gone to fruition or if it's still there.
The only ones I know of are related to the Endangered Species Act. I'm not aware of other ones unless somebody else. I don't know of those.
Anyone else? Councilor Kaiser.
Thank you. I just want to put this in context because it helps me organize it in my brain. So the city of Turner made a change to they adopted new maps or something. They made a mapping change, the city of Turner, that affected a piece of property that Salem owns out in Turner. And correct me if I'm wrong. It says in the staff report, those mapping changes affect a small portion of Salem and take effect on October 18th.
It's not private property ownership, it's actually city limits.
Sorry, okay.
just
Within
clear.
city limits, all right. But it's Turner that made that change. The city of Turner. The mapping change is focused around the city of Turner that affected a portion of Salem within the city limits of Salem.
It's actually FEMA that made the change, but on behalf of City of Turner, yes.
Okay, I understand. Because of that, in that small area, that then necessitated the city of Salem to adopt this new, the verbatim language in order to comply with FEMA. And staff didn't become aware of that until August 23rd when DLCD contacted us to tell us that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then all this widespread notification happened because according to our ordinances, we have to notify people in the floodplain, property owners within the floodplain.
And Measure 56, there's a Measure 56 notice too.
And the real only change is that for electrical, heating, plumbing, et cetera, to be raised 1 foot above the base flood elevation. As far as I see. As far as what was in your presentation in the staff report, that seems to be the minor change, adopting this verbatim language, which is, and the only real minor change is that electrical equipment has to be raised 1 foot above the BFE.
For new construction?
For new construction or substantial improvement
Yes.
on property.
Not for existing.
And that is it. It's not redoing the maps. It's not adopting any kind of new anything.
Yes.
It's just, okay. That's what I thought. And I think there's just been a lot of confusion in the community when everyone got these mailings because it just didn't lay out why. It was just this like, this is changing and everyone thinks my insurance is going to go up to $10,000 a year and there was no context to understand that. I'm not surprised you received dozens or hundreds or whatever amount of phone calls and emails because I think we could have communicated this issue a lot better given context that this is being, triggered because of a change that was made way on the edge of town and it's a really minor change. So I guess, I don't know, maybe it's a learning opportunity for future communications with the public about it because I think this really freaked a lot of people out.
Yeah.
They thought something significant was going to happen and
Mayor, if I
cost
may,
them a lot of money.
and we completely agree with you, Councilor. As soon as we heard what we were going to be put through, we were very concerned about this. We were very concerned as we looked at the calendar that we were putting the council in a very bad position. We don't like, I've been here 24 years, councils don't like to be put in the position that you have to adopt tonight and that's it. So we're very concerned. One thing that we did is our staff went out and met with as many of our stormwater stakeholders as we could. We put out word to the neighborhood associations. So we put the word out to everybody that has shown an interest. But then there's this Measure 56 notice, and the language is prescribed, and it basically says we're taking your first and second born, and you better watch out. And so that, I think some of the issues is this prescriptive language that requires this, and it's very difficult to communicate in this short amount of time with 170,000 residents. But I can assure you that we were and are concerned about putting the word out and really did the best that we could in the very short amount of time.
Well, I want to give, accolades too where they're due. I mean, we responded very quickly to something that we just didn't realize was happening. So that's to be, thank you for that. I do think, if something like this, even though we have to send out, language that's compelled by, DLCD or FEMA or whoever, I would hope that we could also do some type of supplemental language or something that even just simply describes like bullet points, like this is why this is happening. Yeah. It's, something that says, be calm. It's not going to significantly change anything. And here's why. I mean, because even as a counselor, been on council for 3 years, done quite a bit of land use, I was having trouble understanding the staff report. Why are we doing this? It just wasn't clear. It wasn't clear. It still is not clear exactly what the mapping changes that affect a small portion of Salem mean exactly. What were those? So anyways, it's just, I don't want to necessarily get into it tonight. It was just more of a, I think we saw the 5 people or whoever came down to testify because they're scared to death. That they're going to have a huge financial loss here due to some change, which is just not the case. So I think we could do better with that in the future.
Well, in fact, I wonder if you, realizing it's kind of looking back, but I still think people don't know what those letters meant. I know I got a couple of them and just figured, well,
Yeah, city stuff,
yeah, and it's more stuff from the city, but it won't make any sense to me. Apparently, I was correct, and I didn't even have to open the envelope. I think it would help if you put something out, even retrospectively, explaining exactly what this means. I don't know what the average insurance cost is for somebody holding a mortgage here in Salem, and what this does to that insurance cost if they're in this floodplain area. I mean, what's it do? What's going to happen to Marvin and his neighbors on 15th Street? I mean, how does, well?
There's no change to the flood insurance.
Well, then there needs to be something put out that would clearly allow Marvin and his neighbors to evaluate their circumstance and say, well, this is no change. The folks over in West Salem sitting 50 feet above the river, are they going to be affected?
No.
Well, that's what we need to get across. You see what I mean? I think it's really at that level, and I don't see why we can't do it retrospect. I don't think we have to. You had to work really fast and did a great job. I got that part, but can't we also follow up on this and kind of clarify what's happening?
I think there are some outreach requirements that we have as part of CRS, and we periodically send out information, so I think we can certainly work within those bounds so that it doesn't, cost any more money, doesn't create, what we don't want to do is create additional confusion, and I think there is a way to do that here in the not too distant future.
Well, I would just count on you to
re-explain
do it right,
things.
But Marvin and his neighbors ought to know whether they're going to have an increase in their flood insurance that is wildly out of
I will say that if council doesn't act tonight, Mr. Sanders will have an increase of 25%
and I think that's one of the stories
insurance.
that may not be clear. So, yeah, and I would be interested kind of what our average flood insurance is, just because I know there's more of this coming. I'd like to understand what it's doing to people individually. Tom?
Thank you. Following up on both the mayor's comments and Councilor Kaiser's comments, this leads me right back to the community satisfaction survey.
Yeah.
And one of the issues we had, it's two sides of the same coin, communication and engagement, and we see both of that tonight. The first one is the city's communication, and I agree with this, that you guys were scrambling, you did the best you could, you've got certain requirements, but nevertheless, we need to be able to communicate. And the second side of this goes the other way, the engagement. If we had, I don't know how many letters were sent out, and, thousands, I mean, I don't know, hundreds, but whatever were, maybe 5 or 6 people showed up. So that's the engagement side of that, the communication in this case should have led to less engagement because we would have explained to people, but it didn't, and we still only got 5 people out of how many hundred who decided they wanted to show up and discuss things, and good on them. The other thing I think I understand this, and that is there's no change in any floodplain designations. If it wasn't a FEMA requirement, we wouldn't be doing anything. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and I remember at some point there was an issue with Creekside, and I think Creekside water goes through Turner, and then that water comes back down into Wards 1 and Ward 2, and that was the issue we were talking about. And we kind of put that on the back burner because we were worried about what's going to happen to the floodplains here. So what it sounds to me like, Mr. Davis, is that we aren't really in charge of this. FEMA did something for Turner, and at some point FEMA may come back and look at us and say, as Councilor Lewis, that highway is really not a berm and we're going to change it. And so we don't have much control over that, do we?
Virtually none, yes.
Okay.
Councilor Nanke?
Thank you. I just wanted to kind of add one for down the line because we've talked about it at the Water Wastewater Task Force as well, and it refers to that flood mapping and how we start and how we move through the city of Salem with that.
Yeah.
And right now, we're just kind of in a holding pattern, but when those maps are upgraded and those protective barriers disappear because they were engineered to be such, we need to be notifying property owners before FEMA gets involved, or the expense will rise significantly for them if they don't have insurance prior to that mapping being modified. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
So we will be having lots of community discussions when we get to that point in time.
We will have trouble right here in River City, folks.
Turner just went through that. Turner has had a almost a multi-year process with that.
Them with the railroad tracks.
Yeah.
They disappeared.
Well, I hope you will, I hope you will even retrospectively contact the public somehow and explain kind of what went on here if you can, unless you think it creates more problems.
No, we will, Mayor. It's a good point. I hear it from you and from the rest of the council, and I think there's a way to do it where we can do it
simply,
do it simply and in a way that doesn't create more confusion and more concern. But so yes,
yeah, because I did talk Mrs. Bennett out of coming down here. Okay, we'll close the public hearing.
Can I ask a question?
No. You have to ask afterwards, okay? I'm sorry. But if you saw these guys, if you want to ask one of them a technical question, you're welcome to. Okay, public hearing's closed. Councilor Hoy?
I move staff recommendation.
Second by Nenke. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion passes. Okay, Councilor Anderson. Oh, let's do this commissions thing real quick. Okay. Councilor Hoy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the council accept the unanimous recommendation of the Board and Commission Appointments Committee to interview finalists for the Ward 7 vacancy at a special meeting on Monday, October 21st, 2019.
Second by Anderson? Yes. Okay, any discussion? Do you want to say anything? No?
We had a robust conversation at the Boards and Commissions committee meeting. We vetted all of the applications, and I do want to say that I was very impressed with the number of applications and the quality of those applications. I was, you know, when you go into something like this, you're never sure what's going to happen, and we had 12 candidates that were quite interesting with quite a varied background, and I'm very pleased to be recommending that we interview the 3 finalists. I think we'll have a good final candidate out of that process.
Okay. Councilor Nenke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it was actually rather refreshing to see that there were 12 people who were interested in that, knowing that in a previous situation in Ward 1, there was only one person who walked in and applied for that, who happens to be sitting over there right now.
Lucky day that was. Yeah.
Wow. So
it can go sideways.
That's right. Be careful what you wish for.
That's hilarious.
Okay. God, you guys are a tough house. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion passes. So we will hold interviews on what date again was it? 23rd? All righty. Now, Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. I move the staff recommendation on item 3.2A, declaring a public need and the Salem City's intent to negotiate, if necessary, to commence eminent domain proceedings for right-of-way acquisitions in the McGilchrist improvement project.
Second by Lewis. Okay.
I think this is a terrific thing, and I understand that what we are doing now is merely giving you the authority to acquire right-of-way, but I guess this is my corollary to the hanging bridge issue, because I really think we ought to look very carefully when we come to the design phase of this for bike ped issues. I happen to place where I do a lot of my litigation is on 25th, just off McGilchrist, and depending on how much stuff I have in my briefcase, I ride my bike or I take my car and I go down McGilchrist, and I can see that it needs lots of improvements, and it's only going to get worse if we make the traffic going easier there. So, and I also know we had a motorcycle car fatality there just a little while ago. So it seems to me that I would like, one other thing, the Salem Brewery District, the people in the Salem Brewery District have been all excited about walking and biking and everything else there. So the people who are down in that area of town are interested in that, and I would hope that we could consider separated bike paths, and we could also look at some sort of crosswalk and islands there. And I know you'll come back with some sort of design implementation, but I really hope we could consider that as well.
Right.
So, Mayor, if I may, we have we do have a design for the project. That's how we know what right-of-way we need. It's a minor arterial standard design, which means sidewalks, curbs, bike lanes, and a lot of stormwater, and that's really the big. This is a $20+ million project. The reason you see it before you is because we've been chipping away with our allocation of federal money. In fact, Julie Warnicki told me just today that next Tuesday, SCAT's policy committee will decide if they'll allocate money for the 22nd Street realignment and see if we can start bringing that to bear. That just keeps moving ahead, and so we can do. I think doing, it's a 3-lane section, certainly west of 22nd. 3-lane sections lend themselves to crossings. There isn't a lot to cross to, but there could be opportunities to do some medians and that kind of thing. Separated bike lanes are going to be tougher just given the right-of-way limitations, but there absolutely will be bike lanes and sidewalks. And then that will lead us to a discussion of what do we do at 25th? Yeah. And what do we do at 25th from McGilchrist north? And we have chased that multi-use path in the past, and it hasn't quite made it up in the funding categories for federal money, which is what we have access to at this point. But we're aware and we're working on it.
I am sure that will make Mr. Sturba happy on the 25th improvements. And you know, and you and I have had this discussion in passing before. I use High Street all the time, and it's a lot better when you're going, I think it's Cottage or Trade, but when you're going south there before you hit Bellevue, I don't know if it's Bellevue there, but before you hit the city garage, because then you have parking, then bike space, as opposed to bike lanes and parking. And I know you aren't going to have parking there, but I'm also thinking maybe you could consider some of those just posts that separate, the visual separation, not just a line, but so along that line, some you know, I don't know what you call them, but you know what we call them, and the traffic designer would too, that would actually show that there's a delineation between there other than just a painted stripe on the street.
Very good. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, motion passes. Then we have item 6A, Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On behalf of Councilor Leung, I move that item 6A be pulled and scheduled for a future public hearing before City Council.
Second. Second by Anderson. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. 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 All opposed?
No.
One no? Okay. Motion passes. You all have had a chance to review these. Anyone else? Okay, we'll move on then to second reading.
Okay, ordinance bill number 1419, an ordinance declaring and proclaiming certain territory located at the 4400 and 4600 blocks of Hazel Green Road Northeast, annexed to the city of Salem, prescribing Salem Area Comprehensive Plan Map designation, prescribing zoning, and withdrawing the territory from the Marion County Fire District Number 1. Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Councilor Naiki.
Aye.
Councilor Leung's absent. Councilor Osick.
Aye.
Councilor Hoy.
Aye.
Councilor Lewis.
Aye.
Councilor Kaiser.
Aye.
And Mayor Bennett.
Aye.
And the next one is
Passes.
ordinance bill number 519, an ordinance declaring certain territory located at 4980 Center Street Northeast, annexed to the city of Salem, prescribing zoning and withdrawing the territory from the Marion County Fire District Number 1. Counselor Nanki.
Aye.
Counselor Lenz absent. Counselor Ossick.
Aye.
Counselor Hoy.
Aye.
Counselor Lewis.
Aye.
Counselor Kaiser.
Aye.
Counselor Anderson.
Aye.
And Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay, passes.
And one more. Engrossed ordinance bill number 1719, an ordinance relating to the floodplain overlay zone, amending SRC 300.100 and SRC Chapter 601. Counselor Leung's absent. Counselor Ossick.
Aye.
Counselor Hoy.
Aye.
Counselor Lewis.
Aye.
Counselor Kaiser.
Aye.
Counselor Anderson.
Aye.
Counselor Nanki.
Aye.
And Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay, passes. I don't see, does anyone else want to, did you want to testify at all? No? Okay, did you get an answer to Okay, anyone else?
Tell us about your day.
Anything? It's your chance. You got 3 minutes to just talk. Okay, then we are adjourned.